It's nice to be with you again. It's nice to see you, even though I can't see you. We're getting really great feedback from people who are using these Facebook Lives in their parenting, in their families. Keep coming. You will be surprised if you were to go back now. This is only the 11th one we've done each weekday. If you were to go back now and listen to the first ones, you would understand them better. And that's true of just almost anything. It's kind of the nature of teaching a thing that it drives me crazy as an author, because the first sentence I say in a book, they kind of need to have the context of the last sentence. So you need to understand everything as a whole, but people don't learn that way. You can't give them the entire book at one time. Like putting together the pieces of a puzzle. So you got to start somewhere. You put the first two pieces of a puzzle together, you got nothing, but you got to start someplace. Keep coming, keep looking at them. Look at them more than once. Share them with your friends. Parents everywhere need to know more, and they need to be more. And loving and teaching is just indispensable in moving toward those goals. And that's what we talk about here every day. Now, this next little piece is from a single mother. I strongly suggest that everyone listen closely, because this is an important question. It's specific in that she's a single mother and has a 16-year-old daughter, but almost irrelevant. In fact, we can benefit from almost every example that we use here during these Facebook Lives. No matter what the age of the child or the circumstances of the family, there are principles that are being implemented in ways that we can implement in our families. Mom says, I have a 16-year-old daughter who, because of the social distancing required in our particular location by the government in the pandemic, is becoming more and more depressed and lonely. I'm going to speak to all of you before I answer Mom. We're going to see more and more of this. We're going to see more and more people who are depressed, anxious. We're going to see addictions become more and more obvious. We're going to see anger. We're going to see fears. People are already at the edge of survival. That's why they use all these behaviors. That's why people get angry and withdraw and act like victims and lie and hide. And all of that stuff is a response to a baseline lifetime pain. Well, now we add an additional fear, a civil war, an invasion of a virus so tiny that we can't see it. So for many people, it becomes a state of constant hypervigilance. It's almost like we look around to see if we can see the virus. We don't know where it's coming from, which is one of the reasons that it's extra scary, is that we can't see it. If it were an invasion of muskrats, beavers, deer, well, we could see those. But this is a little extra scary because it's unknown and so small. Nearly all kids are feeling the pain of not feeling unconditionally loved. And when I say nearly all, I mean, like 99%. I wish I were exaggerating. I'm not. Been doing this too long to exaggerate about this. Many of them, well, nearly all of them, find relief by, just to cite one example, complaining and whining to their friends who, of course, often are also victims and who whine and complain. People gather together based on common interests, behaviors. Basketball players get together to play basketball. Soccer players don't get together. In Europe, football players don't get together with basketball players. Victims get together with other victims because everybody knows the language of victimhood. See? You don't have to explain, oh, poor me, because everybody else in the room is going, oh, yes, poor you. And now, are you done? Because now, poor me. So they get together with other victims and they find some sense of pain relief, odd, but they do, by feeling less alone with other kids who are also victims or entitled or in some other way expressing their unhappiness. Misery can actually create a connection with other people. It's pretty superficial. It doesn't last for very long, but pain creates bonds. Not great ones, but it does. Men in the military, they're people who come out of battle and just feel like brothers with the men that they were in battle with because they shared the same misery, fears, horrors, and yet when they get home, that doesn't translate to anything else. They don't feel closer to their families. In fact, they very often experience PTSD and they're more separated from their families. It doesn't create lifetime bonds except for the, maybe once a year reunions. Even guys who've been in war and who get together tend not to talk about their pain that occurred in the battle, but there is at least some kind of connection, some sense of brotherhood. People in prison, prisoners share a connection from being in prison, and some prisoners, when they get out of prison, intentionally commit a crime to go back to prison because they're with their people. We'll do anything to feel some kind of connection, even if the connection is twisted. It doesn't work very well. It beats none. I'm talking to the mom, I'm describing your daughter. She misses the connection with people who acted like victims with her and whined and complained and were in pain. So when you remove that pain relief, like having to stay at home and not be around your friends, when you remove the relief that comes from being around people to complain to or to rebel with, the pre-existing pain of not feeling loved simply becomes more apparent. What's the real pain? The real pain is a lifetime of not feeling loved. That's almost invariably the real pain. The coronavirus just adds a little bit to it, or missing your friends adds a little bit to it, or I don't have access to Wi-Fi with sufficient speed becomes an inconvenience that adds to my lifetime of pain. Almost everything that makes us blow up and get angry just simply pushes us over an edge that we were already at. So we're up trying to climb a mountain and we're at the edge of the cliff, and I mean edge of the cliff like our feet are half on and half off, and something happens and over we go. Mom writes, the surface symptoms of my daughter are that she's missing time with her friends, which she whines about all day long, and is bored, which she whines about for whatever part of the day is left after she's whined about missing her friends. But the underlying issue, now pay attention to what mom thinks is the underlying issue. But the real underlying issue, says mom, is that she is sad and angry that her dad left our family 3.5 years ago. Now listen carefully to the answer. You identified the underlying issue as anger that her father left the family. No, that is not the underlying issue. This is really important to get, not just for you, Mom, but for everybody who's listening. First, keep in mind that this girl has felt unloved all her life. I am absolutely certain of that. How could I know that? People ask me that all the time. You don't know me. How do you know that? Well, it's not that complicated. You're walking through a field and you step in a great big, deep, wet pile of cow poop. It doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to think, I'll bet a cow passed by here not long ago. See the point? Sometimes the evidence is so strong for a thing, you know what happened. You know a cow walked by there, and if it's nice and fresh and steaming in the early morning air, a cow walked by there within the last hour. Guaranteed. Kids who are genuinely loved and happy don't get depressed and lonely. That's how I know that she's been feeling depressed and lonely for an entire lifetime, or some variation on depressed and lonely, at least unhappy. More important than her father leaving is the fact that she didn't feel loved by her father for the 12 and a half years of her life before he left. Did you hear that? That's important. That's the important thing. The 12 and a half years of her life before he left, she didn't feel loved by him. Now, talking to mom, or by you. Second, when he left, she didn't actually lose any love. What she lost was the dream, the hope that maybe someday, if she was good enough or some miracle occurred, he might love her. That's what she lost 3.5 years ago. She didn't actually lose love because he wasn't loving her in the first place. When he left, he crushed her dreams. And that's a very big deal, to lose our dreams. When combined with what came first, him not loving her for her whole life. First, she got no love. And then second, he crushed her hopes. That can be fatal. So understand that dad leaving is not the primary problem. Why does it matter that we identify that it's not? Because we tend to focus on some external single event and say, that's why that person is unhappy. And because we think that's the problem, dad leaving is the problem. Well, now we're screwed, because if dad leaving is the problem, then the only solution is what? Having dad come back. Well, that's not going to happen. So if you identify, just like when I used to work in medicine as a surgeon for 20 years or in emergency rooms for years, you misdiagnose a patient, they're not likely going to get better because you're going to give them the wrong treatment. So dad leaving is not the problem. It's just a visible event to focus on, and we love to have answers to why we're in pain. We love to, even if we have to make them up. Just like some people focus on the death of a parent. That's another reason that people will say, my whole life has been ruined because my father or mother died. Or they like to focus on physical abuse or sexual abuse or whatever as the cause for their entirely dysfunctional lives. I have never seen somebody ever who has felt relatively unconditionally loved their whole life, and then a single traumatic event occurred, and that traumatic event determined the misery of the rest of their lives. No, doesn't happen. It's the lifetime of not feeling loved that's the primary wound. And individual events just become symbols of that wound, or the thing that just pushed them over the edge that they were already on, as we talked about earlier. I will always remember being in a real love group many years ago when a man, maybe 35 years old then, was crying, tears, he was sobbing and describing how his entire life had been ruined because his father had died when he was 7. Now, I was just learning real love back then, but I looked around the room and maybe a little impetuously, I asked the other 15 men in the room, would you be willing to raise your hand if you wish your father had died when you were 7? Every man in the room raised his hand. We were, the rest of us, actually jealous to some extent that this man who was crying at least had the dream, the hope that if his father had lived, his father would have loved his boy, this man. But further questions revealed, nobody had ever, when you say, my father died when I was 7 and it's ruined the rest of my life, victimhood trumps everything in the short term. Pain trumps everything. Nobody would ever dare question what somebody says when they say, I have so much pain because of blank, because they're looking for an explanation. Nobody dares question a victim. But I asked him a whole bunch of questions. And it turns out that during his first 7 years of life, while his father was there, his father didn't spend any time with him at all. In fact, the more that he thought about it, the more of a nightmare his father was. But after his father died, He had an event to blame everything else on, and he clung to his dream that his life would have been happy if his father lived. Wasn't true. So back to mom. Your daughter lost both the love of the first 12 and a half years of her life and the dream that he might love her. That's the cause of her pain. Mom says she believes that if he really loved her, he would have come back or never left. Oh, I know. Almost every child of a divorce or a parent just abandoning the family feels like that. But the truth is that he left. Why? Why did he leave? Because of the child? No. Because of you, the mom. Maybe some. But the real reason that he left the family was because of his own lifetime of pain, period, full stop, underlined in bold. That's why he left. He was in pain. Which means if he was in that much pain, that just proves that there's no way he could have unconditionally loved his daughter during those first 12 and a half years. Couldn't have. I don't know the details. I don't need to. But I've spoken to many parents who were the abandoners, who abandoned their families, and every one of them was in severe emotional pain from not being loved in their own childhoods. Parenting simply put on them the additional pressure to give love that they didn't have. They never got any. Same with your daughter's father, your ex. He didn't know how to love her, and there's little doubt he didn't know how to love you either, or he wouldn't have left. And you have to tell her that, because right now she thinks the cause of her anger is his leaving. It's not. And you have to tell her that he never loved her and that you, mom, didn't know how to love her either. Now, how dare I say such a thing? How do I know? Because I know uncounted children who were raised by one mostly loving parent and one parent who didn't know how to love at all. If a child has one parent who is unconditionally loving, that child's going to be okay. Children just need unconditional love. Enough. They don't need it from a particular person. They don't need it from any particular two people. They just have to have it. Can't tell you how many times people have said to me, real love just seems so familiar when they finally figure out what it is and know how to go about getting it. And I ask them why it seems familiar. Where did you get it? Over and over I hear this. Oh, from my grandma, or from a grandfather, or from a great aunt, or somebody. We will take love from anywhere. If you're dying of thirst in the middle of the desert, you don't care one bit whether it's the water is called by a particular brand name, do you? Water's water. Love is love. Your daughter hasn't had love at all. And she's miserable because neither of her parents knew how to unconditionally love her. She doesn't know what unconditional love even feels like. Now, there's no blaming because neither you nor your ex-husband was unconditionally loved either. As much as you wanted to and as hard as you tried, you did try. You really did your best. So did he. He finally gave up and had to leave. You could not love your darling little baby, who at birth, I'm sure, you promised to love better than you were loved. Well, good promise, but with what? I promised to love my children unconditionally, but I've never been unconditionally loved myself. What are the odds I'm going to be able to keep that promise? Pretty much zero. Love them with what? What love? You didn't get any, so you weren't going to give her any. With what knowledge would you have loved her? You were never taught how to be unconditionally loving, so you had neither the knowledge nor the power to love her. Now listen to this part. Not only am I not accusing you of something or blaming you, I'm telling you it's not your fault. What a relief. It's not your fault, it's not his fault. But she needs to hear that neither of you loved her as an explanation. You don't need to sob and beat yourself and pull out a whip and beat yourself with stripes. No. But she needs to finally understand where her pain comes from. Mom says, quote, I want to help her with this pain. We've tried counseling and it was just frustrating for her because she did not know what to say, end quote. Well, duh. What child knows what to say about their pain or their anger? They don't even understand where it came from. She didn't know anything about what I'm teaching you here. She knows only to scream, sometimes with her voice and sometimes with other behaviors, in anger at what? Her father? You? Partly. But really, she's angry at the entire world, God, everyone, for forcing her to endure a life without love, without joy. That's pretty awful. Mom says, and honestly, if she doesn't have her anger toward her dad, she wouldn't know who she was. Oh, that's very well said. Yeah, and it becomes a real problem. When we've been angry long enough, we believe it's who we are. We say that about people. Yeah, I know Fred. He's just such an angry man. Wrong. Anger is how he responds to pain. It's a lie to say that somebody is angry. No, that's not who they are. It's how they respond to pain. But it's understandable that we identify ourselves as angry people or other people as angry people because they're that way all the time, which means what? They're in pain all the time. Mom finally says, what can I do to help her with her feelings? That is a great question. It's going to take a little bit to answer it, but it's worth it. First, you have to tell her this. Don't tell her till you're ready, but you have to tell her that the real reason she is so angry is that you didn't love her. If you have to read the parenting book 8 times until you can say that with a straight face and not be crying and not be in denial, do whatever it takes. I'm not recommending you go tell her that right now because until you mean it, it's going to actually be counterproductive. You tell her the real reason she's angry is because of you. You didn't love her. You describe unconditional love or real love to her. You can find a description in any of the Real Love books that are at reallove.com. Real love means to love her without disappointment or irritation. Whew, that makes love pretty rare, doesn't it? I have loved more people than I can count. Thousands and thousands of people, and they have said over and over, this is the first time I've ever felt like this. What does that tell you about the frequency of unconditional love? First time they've ever felt like this. And then you give her examples because you can't just say, I never unconditionally loved you. She'll argue with you. She'll say, well, no, you've loved me. She doesn't know what it is, remember? You explain that it's love without disappointment or irritation, and you give her examples of how you didn't love her, even though you tried. You get to say you tried, but you don't get to make excuses about it or telling her this is going to be worthless. And you say, and neither did your father. Oh, yeah, I know. I've heard the thing. If you can't say something good about somebody, don't say anything at all. That is just such terrible advice. If somebody doesn't tell her that her father didn't love her, she's going to spend the rest of her life thinking that, oh, well, if only he hadn't left. No, it might have been the best thing in her life that he left. Might have been worse if he'd stayed. Worse because he couldn't love her. Worse because you and your ex would have been in conflict. Who knows? What matters is that the one thing in life she wanted more than anything from birth was the unconditional love of her parents, and she didn't get it. She was screwed over big time, period. And you got to tell her that in those words. She's got to hear that. You have to admit this, what I just said, or her entire life, her anger, her resentment, her loneliness remain a mystery to her. Or she blames it inappropriately on a single event that happened when her dad left, and that's wrong. We don't like mysteries. Second, we were talking about what you could do. We already did the first. This is number 2. Tell her that not feeling loved as a child, well, for her whole life, has been a very, very painful wound for her. Painful, devastating. It made her feel small, worthless, helpless. Pain is bad enough, but pain plus no way to stop it, which defines every child. Children don't know how to stop the pain of not feeling loved. Pain plus no way to stop it is called helplessness. And boy, that is just the worst. Trapped. You're in pain and you're trapped in pain. What she has to understand is that pain came first, not anger. Anger is a response. That matters because she's not dealing with the pain. She's just expressing anger. She's just indiscriminately, emotionally, violently expressing her anger. Well, how do you address that? You don't. You have to address the underlying pain, not the underlying her father left. That's incurable. Third, you explain to her that her anger is a way for her to feel less helpless, the condition that we just can't stand. Anger gives her a rush of power. She will identify with that. She feels stronger. She actually feels more alive, oddly, when she's angry, even though it's temporary and superficial. Completely understandable. Fourth, you explain that anger, even though it gives her a temporary feeling of power, never, ever makes us happy. Just temporarily lessen pain. It's not a great way to live because it's not love we get from anger. And then we have to keep using anger more and more, as you have seen her do. You're recognizing the phrase more and more? That's virtually the definition of an addiction. Anger becomes as addictive as any drug, probably worse. You said that she doesn't even know who she'd be without it. Many people introduce themselves to me and say, I'm an addict. And I'm going, no, you're not. You're addicted to anger, being right, drugs, alcohol, porn, blah, 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 because you're in pain. But your addiction isn't you, not even a little bit. Now, fifth thing you can do. You explained to her that now her anger is actually making her wound worse. What we do to survive anger makes it impossible for us to thrive. We can't live. Because when she's angry and lashes out, deep down, she feels even less lovable, certainly less attractive, less worthwhile. While she's angry, who wants to be around that? Except fellow victims for a little while, and then even they get tired of it. She's inflicting her own wounds on herself now. That's why the anger has to stop. Not by stopping the anger, but by healing the pain. So, what do you do now? After all that understanding, what can you actually now do? Reasonable question. She needs to read the parenting book with you. Or more appropriately would be, you need to read the parenting book while she's there with you. Read it out loud. Or watch the Ridiculously Effective Parenting Training with you. Oh, that would completely transform her life. The one that you can find on realloveparents.com. Because she needs to hear how she was wounded. And both the book and the parenting training will explain that in exquisite detail. In the parenting training, she will learn how she got to be the way she is now, or behave the way she's behaving now. And she needs to watch you realize how she was wounded. So she can't keep playing this con game of, it's because dad left. It's a game now. She will also learn how to recover from the wounds. And you will learn how to help her recover. Yeah, that's pretty big. In the meantime, though, while you're going through 45 hours of training, and now already the archives that have been accumulating every week of written answers, video answers, conference calls that I facilitate with other parents, while you're doing all of that, which is a lot of training and still not enough to really be effective as a parent. While you're doing all that, what can you do in the short term? Because, well, we all want to know, what can I do right now? So first, here's what you can do in the short term. No more acting out. It's what I call indiscriminate anger. It's not expressed in a way that you can do something about it. It's just spewed like vomit. What do you do with vomit? Clean it up, flush it down the toilet. What else is there to do with it? It just makes a mess of everything, and even after you've cleaned it up, it stinks. No more acting out, which is anger, attitude, which covers a whole lot of things like victimhood, loneliness and withdrawal. No more of that. Now, I'm not saying she has to stop it, but no more of that without talking about it. It's the indiscriminate anger that's killing her. If she can say in words to you, I'm feeling angry, that's a whole different thing, because now we have a potentially loving and healing conversation. But while she's just hitting people emotionally and verbally, nobody heals while they're doing that. I can remember when I went to drug treatment 100 years ago, and one of the things they had us do is, I don't remember what it was, a bat, a tennis racket, something, beat a pillow or whoever, and imagine that was whoever traumatized us. And I beat a pillow to the point where the staff was frightened for their lives, apparently. And there was a brief sense of relief from doing that. And that didn't change a dang thing, because it's just the indiscriminate venting of anger, which is useless. In fact, they've now proven that those exercises are actually counterproductive. The more often that we just simply vent our anger, the angrier we become, proven by studies. Which brings us to number 2. You're going to tell her that you're going to have a zero tolerance. I love the word zero, because if you say less of something, what's less? Half of something. How do you identify that? Everybody can get their head around zero. I allow 0 rats to play in the kitchen. 0. Because it turns out my sweet partner Donna doesn't like rats running around the dishes. No, we haven't had a rat ever that I know of. But 0 tolerance for those. 0 tolerance. And you don't have to discuss it with her beforehand. You're simply telling her that this is a new rule in your family. 0 tolerance for 5 things. Anger, which she does a lot. Whining, which she does a lot. Lying. Teasing. She's a single child. Probably not a lot of teasing, at least not that you see. And withdrawing. Back it up a few seconds if you want to hear them again. That doesn't mean you ban those things, anger, whining, lying, withdrawing. It means that she can't do them without you talking to her about them. That's the key. Why? Because she's hurting herself every time she does it. She's making herself feel smaller and more worthless every time she just indiscriminately expresses anger. She ends up beating herself in addition to everybody else. She feels worse about herself every time she does any of those things that I mentioned that we're going to have a 0 tolerance for. 3, you're going to have family meetings every single day with her. They're that important. You'll watch the parenting training every single day. You'll read from the book every single day. You'll talk about life. You'll maybe watch these Facebook Lives every day. Something every day where you teach her and love her. Why? Because she will heal only as she talks wounds, not her anger. The anger is just a reaction. She needs to talk about the wounds as she feels vulnerable and while you love her. I could say that 12 times in a row and it wouldn't be enough. Your daughter will never heal while she expresses her anger, ever. Never seen it happen. She will heal as she talks about her pain, her wounds, and is vulnerable while you love her in her pain. She has to talk about her pain. She has to experience her pain and then heal, as opposed to simply reacting to her pain, which is what she's doing now. And where's that gotten us? It's just getting worse. Reacting to pain alone takes no skill whatever. I back up, I touch the hot stove with my arm jerks away. How does that help me? Well, it keeps, I suppose, the wound minimized, but it doesn't heal anything. She's just reacting. Pay attention. Right now, your daughter is in constant pain, and this is true for almost everybody who's watching this. Our children are in constant pain. Most of the time, they don't recognize that because they've always been in pain, so for them, it's become normal. It's going to get worse because she's adding to her wounds with her protecting behaviors, and she continues not to feel loved, which is the primary wound. But the problem still isn't the pain. Pain can heal. The problem is that she mindlessly, unconsciously, reflexively reacts to her pain all day with her anger, her loneliness, which is a form of victimhood and withdrawal, which never heals the pain. Again, she isn't truly experiencing her pain. Big difference. Experience it and do something about it, or just react to it. Almost sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? That you would stand by, in fact, insist on her feeling her pain. That just sounds almost mean. No, that she'd be vulnerable in her pain and let you love her in her pain. If she's in the middle of reacting to her pain, it doesn't matter what you do. If you love her while she's reacting, she's got to be in her pain in order to heal. Simply reacting to her pain is worthless. So no more reacting. Zero tolerance to her anger and whining and withdrawing and all that stuff without you talking about it. When she says she's angry, and I'm going to get really specific because we need that as parents. When she's angry, you say, this is just an example. You can change the words all you want to. Quote, I'm going to give you at least words that I know work. You can make up your own. Honey, it's not anger. You're hurt. You're wounded. You're bleeding all over the place. Why? Because I hurt you. Because I didn't know how to unconditionally love you. Dad hurt you. You're in pain. Your anger is just a distraction. End quote. You can just start off with that and watch her. And if you can say that without crying yourself, because as soon as you cry yourself, now the attention's on you and you just made it impossible to make a difference. If you can say that, the majority of children will bawl their eyes out. Hold her hand. Do not apologize. Apologies mean nothing. She's already learned from you that you apologizing for making mistakes doesn't mean anything because then you just do it again. She needs your understanding, not your apologies. Her apologies will be rejected and actually feed her anger. Hold her when you put her to bed at night and touch her from your forehead to toe. And you're going to be having family meetings and you're going to be studying every day and you're going to be doing the parenting training together every day. You're going to change your daughter's life. Is there anything else that you have to do that's more important? That's how seriously we have to take parenting. And yet, when I say take it seriously, notice I'm still having fun doing this. It's incredibly serious. Our children are dying, and yet we can help them heal and have fun. I worked emergency rooms for years. I was a director of 2 or 3 emergency rooms. I can't remember now. It's been too long. For 6 years, in addition to the 20 years I was a surgeon. And when somebody would arrive in pain, they were almost always reacting to their pain. They certainly weren't solving the pain. So they would say things like, I hurt here, I hurt, oh, over and over and over. They would say that, which is understandable when you're in physical pain and you don't like it. And they usually wanted immediate pain relief. That's what they wanted. Who cares what the diagnosis is? Get rid of my pain. Now, I'm all for pain relief, believe me. I don't like pain either. But first, when I was in the emergency room, I had to let them feel the pain and describe it to me so that I could appropriately diagnose them and eliminate the cause of the pain. If I simply let them scream in pain and responded only to their indiscriminate spewing of it and just gave them a shot of morphine, I can eliminate everybody's pain with enough morphine. Everybody's. But the cause would remain unknown, and the pain would return. And the same is true with your daughter. She has to feel it, understand it, and heal it with your help. She can't do this by herself. Absolutely cannot do it. No way. So don't ever look at her and go, why don't you just do something about it? She doesn't know what to do. So paradoxically, even though you're finally doing what will truly help her feel the pain, talk about the pain, heal the pain, love her, she's going to hate it when you do it at first. So I experienced this in the emergency room all the time too. Somebody would come in with a really severe laceration, and it turned out in order for me to sew the laceration up, I had to hurt them more. I had to inject them under their skin, and you don't care about the details, but the injections hurt. So I had to hurt them more to make them better. She's not going to like these family meetings in the beginning and you having a zero tolerance for these things. She's going to get angrier and probably scream at you that you just don't understand, parenthesis, you stupid woman. Right now, she actually likes being the victim. Acting like a victim and being angry gets her lots of attention. People pay attention to victims. All people have to do is hear that whining sound that victims make. You've heard it all. You've heard it 1,000 different ways. And they stop everything to ask what's wrong for a while. But then all victims wear out the welcome of the people around them. Victims control the world around them temporarily. She controls you. She gets attention from you and sympathy from you because of her whining and anger. My poor little baby, her daddy left her. And your daughter is not going to be eager to give that up in the beginning. She likes the attention. She will be reluctant to learn anything where her power over you will be less, even for a second, even though in the end this is going to heal her. She doesn't know that. She doesn't really trust that this is going to work. She might even refuse to participate in your daily meetings. Be ready for this. I mean, listen up. Just almost certain. You might have to take some steps so that she does participate in the family meetings. And at first she might do it reluctantly and defiantly, whatever. If you have to remove her phone completely, if you have to sell her phone and all contact with the outside world and every convenience in her life until she does willingly participate, fine. Because what she's doing now clearly hasn't made her happy. What you've done to this point clearly hasn't made her happy. So we have nothing to lose. So you keep going until she participates. You're not punishing her when you do this. Here, let me have your phone. It's not a punishment. We're not born with a divine right, constitutional right, contractual right, or any other kind of right to a phone. You're simply doing what needs to be done. Let's say she had an operation where physical therapy was essential to the healing. In other words, they do an operation, like say on her shoulder. And if you don't do physical therapy, she's going to end up with a frozen, miserably painful shoulder anyway, even though they did the operation to fix it. So the physical therapy is essential, and it turns out that, take it from me personally, physical therapy is never fun. They make you move the joint or the whatever that they just operated on, and it hurts. Would you let her avoid the therapy simply because she says, well, I don't want to, or I don't believe in it, or I don't like it? No, you wouldn't. Or would you comply if she simply refused to take her daily cancer chemotherapy because, well, it makes me feel nauseated? Yeah, or dead. No, you wouldn't allow her to not do something that is essential to her life. Why? Because you care about her and because she needs this. And you're all she's got, kid. If you don't do this, nobody else is going to do it. And you've only got her at home for a couple more years. You have to act, and act now, and take thorough action, not half measures. Do the parenting training, do family meetings, do the zero tolerance for the things that we talked about. With help and guidance from other people, coming to this Facebook site, watching the parenting lives, going to reallove.com, realloveparents.com. There's just thousands of hours of help. Connecting with people on conference calls. You can do this. Or you can stand by, feel sorry for her that her dad left, and you can just watch her die. I wish I were exaggerating, but I'm not, because I get to see them as adults. And the time when somebody could have helped them, there was nobody there to do anything. And I'm not blaming them, because they didn't know what to do. And when I say die, it's certain that will happen emotionally. It's already happening now. Sometimes it even ends up in physical death. You drive drunk, you drive into a tree, you're dead. Or you start getting suicidal thoughts and you're dead. And I know you don't want to make that choice. Our children are in pain. While they're in pain, if we love them consistently, they will heal. And that's what we're here to learn to do. We'll see you tomorrow.